Hello, I'm Melanie Santostefano, your host, and I want to welcome you to the next episode of the Local Gov Stories Podcast. So, this episode is going to be a bit unique. While I'm doing the introduction and closing of it, Danny will be doing a full interview with Cody Moakes. You might remember that we interviewed him late last year. He is the Chief of Staff for the City of Marion. So, in this episode, Cody is going to take a deep dive into star bonds and why they're a powerful tool for driving economic development. While many of us are familiar with TIF districts and how they focus on real estate tax and the incremental growth generated by projects within a TIF district, star bonds operate differently. They leverage sales tax as the primary funding mechanism. So, in addition to municipal sales tax, for star bonds, the state also contributes a portion of its sales tax, which creates a strong resource that can help to attract new development. I'm going to let Cody and Danny take it from here. So without further ado, here's the interview with Cody.
So I'm so excited today to have Cody Moak, the Chief of Staff for the City of Marion, back with us on the podcast on a really important topic that we're getting lots of questions about. We're researching ourselves, star bonds. So Cody, thanks for being willing to join us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Danny. Looking forward to it.
Marion is just bustling. We were talking off camera. My mother-in-law, who's the chief judge of Lee County, is from Marion, and she continually is throwing in my face everything that Marion has that Dixon doesn't, and we're working on it. But it sounds like star bonds have been a major component of that. So, Cody, could you just walk us through what a star bond is?
Yeah, so it's, for the folks that know kind of what TIF is, it's very similar, except obviously TIF focuses on real estate tax and the increment generated by the projects within that district. This is very similar. However, it focuses on the sales tax, and the big component is it's not just the city's sales tax that's helping to drive the bonds or drive the ability to bond, but the state is also participating with a portion of their sales tax as well, which makes this thing really a huge catalyst for development when the state's willing to kick in part of their sales tax as well.
So, Marion was kind of like the test, the pilot program for star bonds. Is that right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, kind of an interesting history. It predates me quite a bit, but back in 2010, 2011, this concept was really born out of a copy of what the state of Kansas was doing. So they've obviously been in the news recently with their ability to kind of steal the Kansas City Chiefs from the state of Missouri through the star bonds. But even before all of that, really the state of Kansas made star bonds shine in the development world. So they plopped the first star bond district down on basically a cornfield. Now they have a NASCAR track. They've got the U.S. women's national soccer team training facility in Kansas City, Kansas, or suburbs of Kansas City, Kansas, and it was all born out of this idea that if you can attract people to the area, the sales tax dollars that they will spend can basically fund itself. And so leaders back in Springfield in 2010, 2011 were willing to recreate that to kind of give it a go here in Illinois. And unfortunately, the city worked for 2 or 3 years to try and get it off the ground, kind of through 2013, 2014, and it was never really able to get off the ground. So it's a great story, but the mayor and the master developer of our current project were looking at a demo for some software that would help us with site selection. And this was back in 2019. And the demo, the site selector company pulled up a Google Map image, and on that Google Map image, to this day, it says Marion Star Bond District. And so somewhere between 2011 and 2019, that data was fed to Google, and they had Marion Star Bond District on Google Maps. And um, I think the mayor likes to tell it that he jumped out of his chair and was like, "That's it. That's how we're going to revitalize this old mall that we have." And so we had a defunct mall that is kind of pretty common across the Midwest, I think. And of course, it was a beacon of economic activity back when it originally opened in 1990. And some 30 years later, it was kind of limping along on its last leg. And so We started navigating that process, and I've read that piece of legislation more than I care to admit. But it's a pretty fascinating piece of legislation, and we've walked through the process over the last 3 or 4 years, hand in hand with the Department of Revenue, and a lot of partners. And a year ago, 10 days from now, not that I'm counting, we issued our first set of star bonds in the state of Illinois. So it's been a really exciting process.
And what is that? Is my understanding is that this is game changing for you guys, for the community. Can you talk about the impact that has had, is having, or what's coming, or what has come because of it?
Yeah, so the big thing is we had 300,000 square feet under roof of a mall that, what are you going to do with it? You're going to make it a call center? You're going to make it, we heard a lot of ideas. It'd be a neat museum. It would be a neat, like a extended care facility, like healthcare facility. All that stuff's good, but it's not really growing our economy. It's not bringing people to town. And so, um, primarily what it allowed us to do was find a developer that had a vision of what he could do with that space, and they have executed beautifully on that. We've got I haven't checked my numbers on this, but he likes to tout that it is the North America's largest power sports dealership.
Mm.
So imagine a 200,000 square foot showroom with every color, size of side by side, jet ski, four wheeler, dirt bike that you could imagine in that space. So it's pretty daunting when you walk in. But if you're going there to buy a side by side or some UTV, ATV, and you can't find what you're looking for, you probably aren't looking hard enough, because they've got them all. It's pretty incredible. And what's really unique about that is when he thought about how we could leverage this whole star bond and taking advantage of the state's portion of sales tax, he's not selling t-shirts. He's selling 15, 20, $25,000 items that generate the state's full 5% sales tax. So it's not even just our home rule sales tax items. It's those kind of big ticket, you know, 15, $20,000 sale price items. And so the whole idea is that you use that sales tax, and you pledge that sales tax. The state pledges their sales tax, and depending on what they can argue their sales are going to be. Of course, we had to work with a revenue consultant and come up with a revenue study of kind of what this project would bring to the area. But you take that to the bond market. We used Stiefel out of St. Louis. They were our underwriter. We used Gilmore Bell as our bond counsel, and together they marketed these bonds, and we actually oversold the bonds by 8 times of what we had the market for, which only drives the interest rate down. So it was a huge win-win. But the components of ours are obviously reusing the mall. I mentioned 200,000 square feet of showroom space. There's another 100,000 of what they're calling the Thrill House, family entertainment center type, indoor go-karts, bowling, axe throwing, putt-putt, a ton of arcade games, laser tag, just everything you could imagine. So it's a place where families can gather. There's a two-story restaurant in the mall space, in that 100,000 square foot space. And so we've got this thing that, 5 years ago, we were all looking at each other like, that's going to be a huge drag on our economy. And now it's absolutely exploding it. And so that's really exciting. Worked with a partner as we've kind of been going through this. We also had the opportunity to put in a sports complex. I know you mentioned that you guys may be looking at that as well. And so that's not a star bond project, but we saw that as kind of the supercharger on the engine of this thing. Because what better way of attracting outside dollars into your community than a sports complex, a regional sports complex, right? So we've got 16 fields, going to bring all kinds of families in. We built a air supported dome as well, and so it's going to be all around your play. We have a minor league style baseball stadium here that's hosted Frontier League and Prospect League the last few years, and it's just a really interesting dynamic out there. The partner that we used on the sports complex is called Mammoth Sports. They're out of Kansas, again, in this space. They understand what they're doing. They had a concept. They hired one of the executives away from what I'm going to call one of the major interactive driving range companies. You do with that what you want, but I think we all know who I'm talking about.
We do.
Um, and so they hired this executive away, and they created this concept called the Mammoth Field House. And so it's essentially like a Top Golf, a chicken and pickle, and a pop stroke all in one. And so again, we've got this indoor thrill house, family entertainment center. We're going to have this outdoor driving range, pickleball, putt-putt course. I mean, it's going to be really all something, and it's adjacent to the sports complex. So, one thing that we've seen is that these sports complexes are typically out kind of maybe in the county and in some cheap land. We plop this thing right in the middle of it, so families can park their car and walk all day and experience all of this stuff. So it's really exciting. So I think your question, sorry, long way to get there, was how has this kind of transformed our town? It's really made it to one more family focused with more family activities, but also from the sales and retail component, which is how the city pays its bills. It's going to be incredible for foot traffic and getting bodies from out of town in front of, again, North America's largest power sports dealership.
And so really that dealership is the primary driver of the sales tax that's fueling the development. So when you say TIF, what types of expenses can the Star Bond revenue, the state's portion of the sales tax, your portion of the new sales tax, what can that be used for?
So in the way that our legislation is written, unlike TIF, it does allow for vertical construction.
Okay.
So it's different than TIF in that sense, because ultimately I think the act speaks to the fact that without the vertical construction, there's nothing that will generate sales. And so the state wants the sales tax out of it. And so because of all that development, we've been able to get Texas Roadhouse, Chick-fil-A, Raising Cane's, Seven Brew, but just a bunch of kind of retail restaurants that are going to try and feed these families that are coming in for tournaments. But obviously, they're massively popular with our residents as well.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, we were just looking at this last week. Since 2019, the city's sales tax or retail economy has grown 66%. It's insane. And this thing is just getting off the ground, but the buzz, because it's happening, has really caused a lot of growth over the last several years because these companies have anticipated it, and we've done a good job getting the word out there. And it's really transformed our local economy for sure.
So when you look at the Star Bond itself, so one of the things I'm thinking about with this, sales tax is the primary thing for us to be able to grow, to keep up with our rising pension costs, our rising healthcare costs, as in your town, 75% of our budget is our people, because our people are our service. So when you bring in all of this new sales tax generating, is there a portion of some of that still comes back to the city for your general fund budget, or does that all have to go right back in to the development?
Well, listen, that's one of our concerns because the answer is no. It's got to all be pledged to the bonds, and so both our municipal 1% and our home rule sales tax, all generated within the district, goes to the bonds, as does the state's portion. So what we're hoping for and what we're relying on is the fact that the district is defined, and there's a lot of things right outside the district, like a Sam's Club, like a Walmart, there's a ton of restaurants and that sort of thing. We hope that those continue to do better because of all this additional foot traffic. The studies that we did on the sports complex and these two developments, the mall development and then the field house development, spoke to the fact that we're going to see about 500,000 additional visitors come to town each year.
Yeah.
The sports complex alone made up a vast majority of that. And so, they're going to stay in our hotels, which generates hotel tax. But again, we're kind of limited on how we can use that. But we know that they're going to eat 3 meals a day for 2 or 3 days while they're here. They're going to shop at maybe run into Walmart or run in somewhere else. And so there's certainly some fears on how that's going to interact long term. But our hope is that we're going to see enough activity in and around Marion and in and around the Starbond district or outside the Starbond district that we're going to be able to keep up with that growth. But even without the district, like I said, we're still growing at a pretty good rate. And so to your point, we've been able to keep up so far.
So when you talk about the sports complex not being in the Star Bond, right? Could you have funded the regional sports complex with the revenues from the Star Bond? Could that have gone towards a bond for that, or would that not have been eligible?
Well, we were strategic. So the gate to the sports complex is in the district. So those sales, those ticket sales and gate sales, are Star Bond eligible. And we funded the parking lot for that development, or one of the parking lots for that development, with Star Bond dollars. And we justified that because the gate revenue is obviously going to be generating sales tax. And so, or amusement tax rather. And we put in an amusement tax specifically in the district, and we pledged that money as well, just as kind of an accelerator to get the bonds paid down early. And that process, again, I think is going to be very interesting. But just like anything else, when we're looking at TIF maps, or in this case, a Star Bond map, think about that strategically. Think about how you can leverage maybe a parking lot or the gate in the district. And then, fortunately, the county and the city paired up on the sports complex to actually build the fields, build the complex, and pledged hotel tax to make that happen. So
Okay.
both the county and the city saw the value in that, and the county doesn't have to pledge its sales tax on the Star Bonds, and so they saw the writing on the wall. They know they're going to generate a ton more sales tax with all of these developments, so they were willing to kind of forecast that out and give up a piece of their future hotel tax, which is, again, I think that's a good fundamental way of funding a sports complex. Essentially, the people using it, people staying in the hotels, are the ones that are paying the debt on it. So so far, it's working well for us.
Sounds amazing. So, all right. So with the Star Bonds, you guys are the pilot program. This is now available, or is coming available to the
Right.
entire state. There's different districts. There's a map that breaks this down. And
Mhm.
in most districts, there's one available, and some there's multiple, depending on where you're at. Um, I think, and this is something, where can people go, Cody? I think you know this off the top of your head. Where can people go to see? Because there's a date you got to like declare your intent by, and then you've got to get your project scope in. Can you walk us through kind of how some of that works?
Yeah, so on the state side, DCEO now kind of houses all of the Star Bond stuff. So if you go to their website, they've got a whole page dedicated to it. They had a webinar a couple of weeks ago where they kind of laid it out. I think July 1st was that date that those proposals have to be in, and then DCEO is going to sort through them and kind of slow walk that process, I think, to make sure they're making the right decisions on the projects that they I guess see value in. And so, I thought about this when I read that new legislation, and it differs a little bit from the kind of the program that we're under, but not materially. But it'll be interesting to see, and I hope that every community has a developer that they can go to and say, "Hey, here's the opportunity. Do you have any ideas? Can we partner and at least get a letter sent in to DCEO? And if we get picked, we'll figure it out from there," kind of thing. Because I think the opportunity is so huge, and we're seeing it. Like, please come down to Marion. Let me show you what we've got going on. I'd be happy to give you the hard sell on this, because I believe in it. I believe that in a few short years, it's already transformed our town, and all the construction's not even done yet. And so I can't believe what we're going to see in 5-10 years. And so I think for every community, if you've got a good developer, and that's one thing I'll say, this is my opinion wholly, but if you've got a local developer, I think these projects work when somebody local is working on this. You can't just bring in some national developer or somebody from out of town to make this work. You gotta find somebody that knows the community, understands the community, knows what the needs are, and has the ability to make it happen. Not to scare anybody, but I think our developer works 20 hours a week or 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
I think he sleeps between like midnight and 4 a.m. and gets back to the office by 4:30. He's a machine. And I'm not sure that it takes that, but it takes somebody that's invested in your town to make it work. But everybody's got the same opportunity today, so why not try for it? Because it's transformational for sure.
So when you negotiate these deals, you negotiate them similarly that you would negotiate TIF? Are you negotiating a percentage of the sales tax to the development, to the construction, or in your case, the rehabilitation of this mall to what you've
Yeah.
described?
Well, it's interesting. So the act actually gives the developer that you appoint, you have to appoint a quote unquote master developer. That's the term used in the legislation. And that developer then has the right to negotiate with sub-developers. So, if they have this master project, which is the destination project, for our purposes, the mall was the destination project. But like I said, we've got a Chick-fil-A now. The Chick-fil-A, for example, is not a destination project, but he had the ability to negotiate with them if he was going to give them a portion of sales tax to come into the development, because it's obviously going to generate sales tax to go towards the bigger developments. But ultimately, that right or that ability is kind of taken out of the city's hands at that point. So it's kind
Interesting.
of really unique in that sense.
It is very unique in that sense. What are so let's walk through a real life example because I think this would be helpful for every, city manager, administrator, development director looking at this. So we have a 65-acre site that the city owns right off I-88. It sits right behind Walmart. Both are good location, visible. We're really looking and spiking up conversations with Home Depot, Lowe's, that type of thing. We know what our leakage is, and we've built up a ton of things around this area. Our gateway project, we got a couple TIFs, all that stuff. So what would the strategy be as we look to say, hey, we want to apply and become, have the star bond opportunity for our region. And, we want to, our main, we've got a developer we've been working with. They're amazing. I'd say they're local
Yeah.
and fully invested. What would that kind of look like for us to maximize that to bring Home Depot or to bring a Lowe's?
Well, I think they need to look at how that 65 acres could best be utilized to maximize the square footage of retail space. So the way the act is written, in order to be a destination development, which gets you a larger percentage of the state's share of sales tax on our power sports dealership, which is the destination, they're giving up their full 5%. Think about that. So if if we're selling $20,000 UTVs and ATVs like they're going out of style, it's getting the state's 5%, it's getting the city's 1% municipal, so that's 6% of all those sales, and then it's getting an additional 2.25%, which is the City of Marion's home rule sales tax. So every $20,000 unit is generating 8.25% sales tax that goes to pay for the bonded amount. And so when you're thinking about how you can leverage the district and how you can leverage that 65-acre plot that you have, you need a lot of different things there. I think a large generating home improvement store, large sales generating is a great thing. But a grocery store, for example, is probably not the best use of real estate there, because groceries, if you guys have passed the grocery tax, it's only generating, 1% of sales or something like that. And so think about what kind of big ticket items you can get there, because you're going to get more bang for your buck, because the state will generate more sales tax based on uh, the dollar amount of retail sales within that area. So you either need stores that produce high sales, or you need stores that produce items that will generate a lot of sales tax, like again UTVs, ATVs. But I think on a 65-acre plot like that, a shopping center is probably going to be your best approach. You don't just want to do a Home Depot and have a lot of wasted space and then maybe do another store. You want to try and figure out how to get like a U-shaped or an L-shaped uh, shopping center there and try and combine all those sales. If it's done right and those deals and leases can be negotiated with those tenants by your developer, the future sales of those places should build that complex. I mean, that's the whole concept here. The developer, if he owns the land or the city owns the land, however that works out, there could be a situation where the developer could have enough money to buy that land from the city at market value, have enough money to build those facilities at market value, provide leases to those folks, and the sales that they're going to generate over the next 20, 23, 25 years could go pay down your bonds. And the beautiful thing about star bonds, this is the holy grail of economic development, because the city is not backing these by its full faith and credit. So these aren't general obligation bonds. These are revenue bonds specifically. So they are only tied to future sales tax revenue. So it is a win-win for your community because it doesn't affect your credit rating. They're double tax exempt from the borrower standpoint, or from the buyer, the bond buyer standpoint. So these large banks are who bought ours. So think U.S. Bank, Bank of America, think even bigger. And so they use that double tax advantage, double tax exempt status, to take risks, because we ended up issuing $112 million in bonds. That sounds like an insane number. Like I couldn't even wrap my head around that number. Um, but the banks that bought those, or a portion of those, bought them like $100 million, $1 billion that week. It's just a normal course of business for them. And they like these because they get to charge a little more interest, and all that interest is tax exempt.
Mm.
So everything that they're earning off of these bonds in the future, they don't have to pay taxes on. And so that's why they're so attractive. They don't care that they're not backed by the full faith and credit of the city. And they're willing to take the risk because they don't have to pay tax on the return. So it's really a beautiful, well-written piece of legislation that works well for the city because it doesn't affect our bottom dollar. Our taxpayers aren't on the hook for it. The developer's not on the hook for it. They don't put a lien on the real estate or anything like that. Um, they rely on the studies. They rely on the experts that say, we agree, if you bring in these tenants, you bring in Home Depot, if you bring in Target, if you bring in XYZ, it's going to generate this much in sales over this period of time. Of course, they'll discount that by 20% or so, and then they'll issue you bonds for that amount. I wish it was that simple. It sounds that simple, but obviously there's a lot of nuances there. But that's generally the concept.
And so, the infrastructure that you need, the roadways you need on the development,
All of that's eligible.
all that. So how does Star Bonds interact with TIF? Is there any, I mean, they're doing something totally different, so they don't conflict on what the benefits are, but can you put a Star Bond over a TIF district?
No, you cannot stack those. You can put a star bond district over a TIF district, but the TIF increment ends at the base year of the star bond district. So whatever the base year established is, no more TIF increment will be generated from then on. And that money gets redistributed back to the taxing body. So there's no real benefit there. However, your developer can take advantage of enterprise zone in Star Bond. They can stack those, but they can't stack TIF and Star Bond.
All right. All right. Next question. How long is the Star Bond good for? TIF's 23 years. And so how long do they build that over as far as the repayment of the bond goes?
So I admittedly, I don't know in the new legislation how that's written. That's how our legislation was written originally, 23 years. And it did say in the legislation that you could appeal to the Department of Revenue, which is essentially who we have to answer to, which is different than the new legislation, which is DCEO. But we made that appeal prior to issuing bonds, and they approved it. So we have a 35-year runway.
Right. Excellent. What am I not asking that I should be asking, and that city managers, administrators, economic development directors are going to want to know about this?
It sounds too good to be true, and having the public understand that this is not backed by the full faith and credit of the city is a hard thing because they're like, well, what do you mean it's not? Like the city just issued $112 million in bonds and we're not responsible to pay it back. Um, Essentially, that's the case. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's why if you study Kansas at all, and you'll find plenty of opportunities to find things that failed out there, but it's certainly worth trying, in my opinion, because um, it's simply based on the future revenue. It's based on future sales tax that we didn't come up with. We didn't say that, well, I know Home Depots generate $40 million a year in sales. And so, we're going to issue bonds based on that. You've got revenue experts that come in and do revenue studies. You've got feasibility experts that come in and do feasibility studies. There's a lot of experts that come in that are looking at this data nationwide, applying that to your circumstance, your situation, and essentially making that argument for you. So then it's pretty easy for you then to go to the state and say, hey, here's the information we have. Here's why we think this works. It's obviously going to transform our community. We want to give it a shot. And so I can tell you from our experience, it took us 4 years to get to a place where we could issue bonds. And between 6 months here for a revenue study and 10 months there for a feasibility study, and going back and forth with the Department of Revenue, them internalizing everything that we were preparing. It's a bit of a marathon, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, this isn't going to be something that I anticipate. If you get your letter in by July 1, you're going to know by October 1 whether you can move forward or not. I think it's going to take DCEOs some time to walk through that. But as we've heard our entire lives, all things worthwhile aren't usually easy. And our community's better because we had the stick-to-itiveness to stick with it. And like I said, for anybody listening, please give me a call. I'd be happy to kind of talk further through our experience, or come down to Marion next time you're in the area, and I'll show you around because I'm super proud of it. I mean, this is going to be something that our community is going to be changed for the better for a long time because we had this opportunity and we were able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely amazing. I've been down and through the development area. It's game changing for a community. Real quick, one final question, Cody. You talked about a lot of studies. I'm assuming those are at the expense of the city, the village, the
The
county,
developer, the developer.
developer. Okay,
Yeah,
so the
developer had to pay for
developer.
those.
So are those expenses when the project gets live reimbursable through the Star Bond money itself?
Correct.
All right. All right. Well, hey, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on, for sharing. This is something new. It's cutting edge for everybody else, but for you guys, you're executing on it. You were the pilot. You showed the power of it. You build off what had happened in Kansas. And so, from local government leaders across the state of Illinois to you, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your time. And thanks for really breaking it down so we can kind of understand it. We've got some things to think about.
Yeah, it's certainly not easy to internalize, but best piece of advice that I can give you is like read the act like 10 times. You'll pick up something new each time. And I think I'm on our version of the act. I think I'm on probably read through 416, and I find a new nugget in there each time too. So
Yeah.
it's hard, but like I said, it's a beautifully well written piece of legislation that really gives us all the tools we need.
All right. Keep up the good work, and Marion, Cody, and thanks again, man.
Thanks, Danny.
What an informative interview that Danny did. For those of you interested in learning more, Cody is making himself available. You can reach out to him. He's more than willing to be a resource regarding this economic development tool he is obviously well versed in. So switching gears, there is so much going on now that spring has sprung. So many events to get on your calendar. So I'm going to go through all of them. Got several. So Wednesday, April 8th is the professional development event and luncheon. It's at NIU Naperville. In the morning from 9 to 11:30, there will be a presentation on financial statements, audit processes, and best practices for managing audit findings. And then the luncheon will follow. That's 11:30 to 1:30, and the discussion will focus on mental health in the workplace. The very next day, Friday, April 9th, is the Southwest Illinois City Management Association, which is also known as SWICMA. This is their spring conference. That'll run through Friday, April 10th at the Hilton Garden Inn. That's in O'Fallon, Illinois. On the first day, it'll include golf, networking, and dinner. And on Friday, there's a tentative event at Scott Air Force Base, followed by sessions on how municipalities can change how police officers are hired and economic development for large-scale projects. Note that the registration deadline is this Friday, April 3rd. So IAMA will be hosting their annual conference on Friday, April 17th at NIU Naperville, entitled All Over the Map. It'll include a keynote from ICMA CEO and Executive Director Julia Nowak, followed by several exciting educational sessions. The event will wrap up with an after-hours social. The Legacy Project will be on Friday, May 15th, their annual conference at NIU Naperville. That's called Inner Power, Outer Impact, Strengthen from Within and Impact Beyond. The Metro Golf outing is on May 20th at the Village Links in Glen Ellen. And finally, registration for summer conference has just opened. It's Wednesday, June 3rd through Friday, June 5th in Peoria. This year's theme is Steady Leadership in Uncertain Times. And as always, I'll remind you not only to register, but to get that hotel room before the rooms fill up. So we all know that our fearless leader, Dawn Peters, will be retiring after many years of service. And this summer conference will be her last as our executive director. Dawn will be honored at conference during a special dinner and reception. So everyone must be there to send her off into a very happy retirement. So all the details for all the events I just ran through can be found at ilcma.org. Just click on the calendar. I want to thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on the ILCMA Local Gov Stories Podcast.